Hi, I'm Gyaneshwar from the Arizona State University, and I would like to thank the organizers for this opportunity. In this talk, I will share our experiences with data-driven discovery for geomorphology enabled by robotics and AI. This is joint work with Professor Ramon Arrowsmith, various graduate students, and postdoctoral researcher Chelsea Scott. Robotics and artificial intelligence. What are some differences? We think that robotics enables us to efficiently and safely collect large volumes of data, whereas artificial intelligence or AI allows us to efficiently analyze previously collected data to extract trends. Robotics allows aerial or ground robots to safely navigate around hard to access locations, and AI allows us to extract robust representations and traits from the collected data. These tools have been used by other domains for a long time, and we explore how we can adapt robotics and AI technologies to geomorphology and surface processes questions. Our position is that, like many challenges addressed by AGU, seismology research may be advanced with the adaptation of robotics and AI tools. Towards this, I will present two results that demonstrate our use of robotics and AI tools for earthquake science. First, I will present our results on data-driven geomorphology, going from drone imagery to insights on surface processes. Next, I will explore methods to search, map, and analyze fragile geologic features, leveraging both robots as well as open source simulation testbeds built upon physics engines. Together, I'll demonstrate that our methods present a new workflow for analyzing large geologic sites of interest and weaving surface process narratives. Prior to looking at geoscience questions, we have applied our robotics and AI methods to agricultural monitoring, where we are able to demonstrate automated counting of fruits in an orchard. Going from fruits to rocks, we ask, can we detect and segment all rocks in a site? And then can we use the resulting maps of rocks to extract traits and then resolve surface process questions? So what is the geomorphology problem? Rocky scarps are not well defined by alluvial or bedrock models. The challenge of understanding rocky scarps is the production of transportable material and the subsequent movement. Can we establish a system to characterize particles or rocks? So rocky scarp feature set consists of three factors: volcanic cooling, tectonic activities, and geomorphic activities, such as tumbling of rocks. We identify certain traits for rocks, such as area in 2D looking top down at a site. We look at the diameter of the rock to define this. We look at the roundness of the rock through measure of eccentricity. And we look at the orientation of the rock as well. A test site is an exemplary rocky scarp in the volcanic tableland north of Bishop, California, where the rock composition is fairly homogeneous and there is extensive fracturing of rocks. Here, NSF postdoctoral scholar Chelsea Scott, who is in Ramon's group, spent various days along with a collaborator to collect drone imagery. A data-driven geomorphology pipeline starts with the imagery collected by the drone at this scarp. This imagery is then processed using structure from motion algorithms to produce high-resolution orthorectified images of the site at about 2 centimeter per pixel resolution. We also get a digital elevation model of the site, as you can see here. Some chunk of the data is then annotated by human experts, that is us, and then we apply deep learning algorithms to detect and segment rocks all along the site. In the post-processing steps, we extract a semantic map or a map with meaning that captures outlines of thousands of rocks in this site. Then the final geomorphological analysis involves extracting distributions of traits from this site, such as histograms of rock area, rock orientation, etc. We use the mask RCNN region proposal neural network architecture that allows us to both detect and segment all rocks. We use red, green, and blue, as well as multispectral channels, depending on the drones we use and the cameras they carry. And in addition, we also use relative elevation in the form of images as an additional input channel to the network. This shows the results of our experiment at the volcanic tableland site. You can see the rock detections in distinct colors. And for the whole site, which is about half a kilometer long, there were about 80,000 rocks. And along the scarp, there were about 12,000 rocks. And the scar itself has an elevation about 30 meters on average. Looking at the results in some more detail, we can begin to see the trends along the scar. So going from north to south, here we go from left to right. First, we can see all the rock particles displayed here along the scar. Then we can see the number of particles on this plot. And then we see a measure called MD that captures the size and shape of the rock in some way. So for instance, minus 8.8 is an American football for comparison. So we can extract distributions or histograms of traits such as MD as well as orientation and other properties. And then looking at this figure a bit closely, we can begin to see some trends, such as we could argue that where the scar bends, there are larger rocks and also more rocks. Looking at another visualization overlaid on the scar going from north to south, we can see that in general, there are more larger rocks on the northern side of the scar and smaller rocks on the southern side of the scar. This video here shows how we are working on terrain relative navigation for a drone, where it can autonomously detect the distance to the terrain, plan ahead, optimize its trajectory so that the distance to the terrain doesn't change. This will help us mitigate heteroscedasticity in our detections or the error varying based on where the drone was at the scar when collecting data, since typically lawnmower surveys that we carry out results in a change in the distance to the terrain. So we are mitigating that now through robotics algorithms. We also carried out experiments with a multispectral camera in addition to RGB cameras. It's the same workflow, 50 hours of work in average for human expert to annotate. We had about 2,500 rocks annotated, and then the network was trained, and we looked at the detections. For this result with the multispectral camera, our results improved. And overall, the summary of the use of the deep neural network and then the pipeline, geomorphology pipeline, is the transfer learning or learning from an existing model where we have trained our network on just RGB data and then transferring to a multispectral case. That helps. And also adding digital elevation model improves our performance through use of these relative elevation images. So in the two stories that we are going to tell, the part 2 and part 3 would involve search, map, and analyze of fragile geologic features, and then particle dynamical studies on these features. So we are trying to investigate how we can analyze precariously balanced rocks or fragile geologic features such as this. And to do so, we are developing methodologies for us to allow a drone equipped with sophisticated sensors and onboard computers to search for these targets and then to map them autonomously. To do so, we first have to characterize fragile geologic features, or in our case, precariously balanced rocks shown here. So we look at the basal contact of these rocks and look at the footprint and the minimum angle of this contact called alpha. If we could plot alpha for all precariously balanced rocks in a large region, then we can start to get a fragility spectrum. Now, PBRs are negative indicators of earthquake. So by looking at the fragility spectrum of a large site, we could analyze the past motions that might have happened in that region. Our pipeline for mapping these features consists of 4 parts. First, a drone has to search a region to find features of interest that could be precariously balanced rocks, for instance. Then these targets have to be tracked after detecting using neural networks. Once they have been tracked, they have to be localized in 3-dimensional space to give a rough location of these rocks. And then once they have been localized, they need to be mapped in close range so that we get a 3D model of these features, and hence so that we can extract the 3D traits. So here in this video, you can see the detections by the deep learning algorithm on the right in a simulation environment where you have inserted some geologic features. And these are the filtered outputs by using a Kalman filter. Then to localize the rocks, we use an importance sampling-based approach where a hypothesis is formed with thousands of particles based on the image captured by the drone and the detection of the rock. Multiple views then allows us to narrow down and localize probabilistically where the rock might be. Once the rock has been localized, the drone switches to a rock mapping mode, where it orbits the geologic feature at close range to reconstruct a dense 3D model. It's shown in this simulation here, where at the Bishop's Carp site, we placed a geologic feature, and then the drone executed the whole pipeline of searching for the rock, localizing it, and then orbiting around it once localized to form a dense 3D map. Finally, we look at particle dynamic studies. We want to leverage modern physics engines to simulate toppling of thousands of rocks in order to study fragility plus fate of particles after toppling. We want to use high-resolution 3D digital terrain models to set up the environments, and then we want to carry out Monte Carlo simulations to infer insights from limited field data, for instance. Physics engines have been explored in the hazards community, for instance, to study seismic damage in urban areas. We want to see if these tools can be applied in the context of geomorphology. Looking at precariously balanced rocks, we want to characterize the motions of interest, such as rocking, sliding, slide rocking. And also, we want to identify some measures, such as peak ground accelerations and velocities, rock aspect ratio, which would be height versus width. To gain more insights here, we are collaborating with Professor Christine Wittich at University of Nebraska-Lincoln to explore discrete element modeling with physics engines. We have carried out various simulations on the terrains that you have acquired in the field. Here we show two rocks and then a simple impulsive motion of 1 meter. And then we notice how one rock still stays standing, whereas the other rock topples down. In our simulation engines that use rigid body dynamics engines such as open dynamics engines or Bullet, we can carry out various kinds of simulations. In one instance, we carry out simple impulsive motion of 1 meter in a granite drill site in Prescott, Arizona. And then we observe how the rock topples. In the other case, we are looking at standard shapes and then control ground motions to see how these cuboids and cylinders topple. Our recent tests involve sinusoidal pulse train of ground motions. So here, this video, the simulation is at 4x speed. And of course, here the water has not been modeled. But the contact properties can be set. We can create shakes that are realistic representation of ground motions that have been observed from earthquakes. Finally, looking at multiple particles in order to go towards thousands eventually. Here we show 3 rock particles in the granite dell site, and then we create a 2 meter simple impulsive motion. And then we can observe not just where the particles landed up, but their trajectory as they were toppling down when the terrain motion occurred. So in summary, we showed 2 case studies in 3 parts. First, we showed our data-driven geomorphology pipeline, where we can use high-resolution orthomaps acquired from drone imagery, annotate some of it, then use deep learning to extract all rocks, their outlines. And then through post-processing, we produce a semantic map of rocks or maps with meaning. And then we can carry out geomorphological analysis through extraction of histograms of rock traits. Then in the search, map, and analyze pipeline, we showed how we are beginning to use drones to search for fragile geologic features and to map them at scale in order to get a fragility spectrum of a site. And finally, we showed our work in particle dynamical studies, where we can insert map sites into simulation environments and carry out Monte Carlo simulations on multiple particles to determine the fragility and fate of particles. I would like to acknowledge our students, Zhiang Chen, Tyler Scott, and postdoc Chelsea Scott, and also our funding agencies such as Southern California Earthquake Center, NSF, NASA, Google Cloud Platform, and our school, ASU, and the center I'm part of called Center for